What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today, I wanted to sit down and I wanted to talk with you guys about prioritizing compound movements and some of the reasons of why for that. I've got my computer here with some notes just to kind of keep me on track and help me from rambling too much and going down too many unnecessary rabbit holes. So let's get into it. So this video also, I should preface with, this might be beneficial to you even if you're deep into your training. You've been doing this a while, get you thinking about some things in a different angle, but it's also gonna have value for people that are just kind of getting started and maybe aren't really quite sure what some of this should look like. So again, all these points I'm gonna go through, this is IMO, in my opinion. Take out of it what might be helpful to you, use it. I think we're all just a melting pot of different ideas. And so I'm just hoping to present some good ones for you that you can maybe take forward immediately and apply into your own workouts and your own training. What are compound movements? Basic definition of compound movements, right, is multiple joints, multiple muscles. That's the basic definition that we're gonna use for this discussion. Why should we prioritize compound movement? Well, because I said so. Beyond that, besides Luke said so, why should we prioritize compound movements? They're more bang for your buck, I think, when it comes to making the most of our time. They're arguably more functional. And then calorically, what they do for us on the amount of calories that we're going to burn in completing those set exercises. Functional, that's a whole nother video that we could do, but it's hard to argue that a squat or a deadlift, picking something up from the floor, standing up with it and returning it, don't have some form of function to our everyday life, right? But they're the meat and potatoes, I believe, of gaining lean tissue and keeping lean tissue. So I think when we start looking at our fitness goals from like, hey, I'm trying to burn some calories. If I'm trying to lose some body fat, I'm gonna need to be getting into a deficit. I'm gonna burn more calories with compound movements than I will single joint isolated movements, right? And then for the sake of time, we're going to get into that too a little bit later, but I think there's a lot of value in prioritizing compound movements, which is why I'm doing this video. The 5 compound movements that I tend to recommend the most, and I've talked to a lot of people about this when they're initiating training, is, man, you could be a scary individual. You could have great fitness, great aesthetics, great functional strength if you only did 5 movements for the rest of your life. Those 5 movements being deadlift, squat, flat bench, overhead press, and a bent over barbell row. Those 5 movement patterns, I think, can be key in creating lean tissue, keeping lean tissue, and getting you strong and, again, aesthetically pleasing. So those are the kind of the 5 movements that I tend to lean towards. Obviously, there's many others, but those are the basics. And again, those are the basics with the barbell. I call my facility the Barbell Club for a reason. I believe in the barbell compound movements. And so those are the 5 that I tend to stick to and drive people towards because they work. Things to consider. One of the first things that I always talk to people about, especially my clients, is what's our primary mover? And the primary muscle that should be given the most focus matters to me a lot. And there's also an order of operation that goes into this that I always like to get people to consider. So let's pick one of the compound movements we've discussed already. Let's talk about bent over barbell row. With a bent over barbell row, or any sort of row for that matter, we have to consider, again, compound movement, multiple joints, multiple muscles. I want to be anxiously engaged in thinking about where do I want to feel this the most? And therefore, which is my primary joint of motion? So if we think about a row, and if I'm just doing like a basic row motion here, I know that my shoulders moving, scapula, shoulder blades moving with that, and elbows moving, right? Those are kind of my 2 main joints of motion. What I want to do is I want to get people prioritizing the muscle that's on your axial skeleton or your trunk first, and then the muscle or muscles that are on your appendicular skeleton or your appendages second. So in the conversation of a row pattern here, I know that anytime I'm doing a row pattern, my bicep is going to be involved. Fine. That's, again, the beauty of a compound movement, that he's also working, but I'm not prioritizing him. So as I get into this motion and I'm thinking about shoulder and scapula moving first and then elbow second, it helps me prioritize that down and back shoulder position that's going to get me more activation in my lat or my back muscles. Thinking about why you're doing the movements you're doing matters so much to me. And I encourage everybody to find that and get really good at feeling what you want to feel. Knowing that, again, in a row variation, my biceps are going to work no matter what. Fine. Let them. That's fine. But focus on what you want to feel the most. So that order of operation, much like a math equation, we have to use the right order of operation to get to our final solution. It's the same with your movement patterns. To maximize them, to move without compensation, and to use your body the way it's anatomically designed, I want that order of operation to where the most proximal joint, or the joint that's closest to your trunk, I want that to be where the primary motion and movement comes from, and with the associated muscles. Hopefully that makes sense and is clear as mud. But that's one thing that I always want to start the discussion with, is of where am I trying to feel this the most? Form and range of motion. Form and range of motion is always what matters most to me. Form, when I'm referencing form, I'm talking about things like your tempo. Yeah. What'll happen for a lot of people when they get into heavier working sets or they start getting challenged with the weight, they start increasing their speed, they start shortening range of motion, and the reps start looking different than they did earlier on in the set or on previous sets. I want to avoid that. I want to maintain the same tempo, the same range of motion that I started with. Now, on range of motion is relative. It's relative to the person. It's also relative to the muscles that you're training. So again, we're talking about compound movements, but if I was doing like an isolated movement, let's say I'm doing a reverse fly, and I wanted to prioritize that reverse fly today for rear delt instead of upper middle back, I'm going to probably shorten my range of motion to keep my scapula out of that, so that again, I get more workload where I want it into that rear delt. We will find often that a shorter range of motion will match a smaller muscle. Again, I don't want to get too into the weeds on the range of motion, but I will say this. The most important part of your range of motion is the eccentric, or the lengthening portion. And that's the one that gets skipped the most. So again, going back to my row, we spend a lot of time focusing on getting it back and getting that squeeze, which is great. But then we have a tendency to let gravity just take it back, or the load just take me back. I want to actively resist with that same primary mover into that full lengthening phase without relaxation. There's a lot of studies going around that have been around for a while, and some newer ones too, showing that maximizing hypertrophy and strength comes more from loading in the lengthened phase than it does from the shortened phase. So if you are going to do half reps, I would prefer you did half reps in the bottom stretch position, right? So if you're thinking about like a shoulder press, I want to come all the way to open and lengthen that anterior delt. And if I'm only going to do a partial range of motion and maybe not come all the way to the top, I'd rather have it be the bottom half. With that being said, I still want full range of motion, but full range of motion is relative, because if I'm locking out a joint, that means I'm also resting a muscle, in my opinion. So if I come here on a shoulder press and all my effort is to lock out my elbow as much as possible, and if I get far enough back in that overhead position, I'm going to offload and I'm going to rest for a moment. Bodybuilding, I think sometimes by definition, is making the workout harder. I want you to load the tissue as early as possible within the set, and I also want you to keep it loaded for as long as possible. Therefore, I'm looking to keep activation during the shortening phase, not relaxing or resting at the top, and then keeping activation in the full stretch and not letting off tension there either. So I want constant tension through both portions of the range of motion. So if you consider you have three contractions. You have an isometric, which is where I contract a muscle without movement. I have a shortening phase, or the concentric. Then I have the lengthening phase, or the eccentric. Out of those three, I want all working at the same time. And if I completely apply that isometric, if you will, the whole time, it helps me not offload that muscle and get more work longer. And at the end of the day, that's why we're doing the exercise, to create stimulation. Let's talk about warm-up and or acclimation sets. These are super important for you to have the greatest amount of success possible when it comes to these bigger compound movements. People undervalue and underutilize acclimation sets. Give you an example. Let's say I'm squatting, and let's say I knew that my working set was going to start at 405. I'm not going to do a few reps with the barbell, empty, throw on 135, do a few, and then jump to 405, right? Most people are like, yeah, obviously not. But still, people aren't acclimating and stepping up enough. So maybe before that, before you even got squatting, maybe you hit the echo bike, you got warmed up, got some blood moving. Maybe you foam rolled, maybe you stretched a little bit. So yeah, arguably you're warm, but you are not warmed up to that movement pattern, or your central nervous system is not acclimated yet to the loads that you're going to be using and working against. I have found in my own personal training and my experience with clients that when we appropriately acclimate, we have greater success at those said heavier loads. There's a fear that, well, if I do too many acclimation sets, too many warm-up sets, I'm gonna wear myself out. Okay, but isn't that why we're here? To create stimulation? So yes, those acclimation sets are gonna give me stimulus and still facilitate change, but they're getting my body and my central nervous system ready for the load that I'm going to feel. So it's not such a shock to my system. So if I'm starting at 405, I might start with 135, maybe do a couple sets of 10 to 15. Maybe I'll jump to 225, a couple sets of 8 maybe. Then maybe I'll go 275, or maybe that was feeling really good, so I jumped to 315. Again, maybe a set of 3 to 5. And then maybe I feel 365 for a set of 2 to 3 before I get to my 405. My acclimation sets are very much intuitive. So there's no set reps for me. There's no set percentage. A lot of it is based on how things feel that day. Yesterday when I squatted, I did 3 sets at 135 before I went up. This thing just felt tight. Hips weren't moving the way that I felt like I wanted them to. So I made sure to give my body time so that I could have greater success when I got to my heavier working sets. Don't under acclimate, and don't undervalue warm up and acclimation sets for those compound movements. Depending on how heavy you're training, you might not need as many, but obviously the stronger you get, the more acclimation sets you will need leading up to it. Sets and reps. Things to consider here. Sets and reps. People get into the weeds on this a lot. For general fitness, I have people, ask me, well, should I be doing 8 reps or should I be doing 12 reps? And my answer is it kind of doesn't matter. It matters, but it doesn't. I use rep ranges a lot because it gives us some freedom to be working towards a heavier load, but gives us room for progressive resistance to still be in a successful rep range. Arguably, your hypertrophy rep range, or the rep range that helps create muscle size or changes in shape, is 6 to 15. That is a huge rep range. So I encourage people, don't get so caught up in the weeds, well, it has to be 10 reps. So if you were getting 9 reps, then it's not good. That doesn't make any sense to me. So 6 to 15 is a really good rep range for general hypertrophy. And if we're working on strength, then obviously there's some other things to consider, that maybe we'll do some pyramids so that I can go down in reps, up in weight, and all of that kind of stuff. When you're considering sets and reps, use rep ranges because it gives you room for discussion. And what that discussion is I get done with my first working set, and let's say my rep range was 8 to 12. Okay, I got 12 reps. Cool. Was it, easy, medium, hard? As medium. Cool. How many more reps could you have done? So how many reps in reserve did you have? Yeah. And maybe instead of easy, medium, hard, maybe we talk about rate of perceived exertion. So that scale could be 1 to 10. 1 is like, wasn't hard at all. 10 is like, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. Pick a range, whatever you want your range to be. Maybe it's 1 to 5, but you're having this conversation after your set. Okay, I got my 12 reps. What was my rate of perceived exertion? It's probably a 7 out of 10. Okay, you got 12. How many reps could you have done? How many more could you have done? How many reps in reserve did you have? I probably could have got another 3 reps pretty easy. Okay, cool. So you could have gotten 15. You have 4 reps to lose because the bottom of your rep range is 8. Yeah, you follow me? 8 to 12. So that means I should probably add load. Again, assuming my range of motion and my form stays the same, I'm gonna go up. So I go up in weight, second set, and I hit the wall at 10. And 10 is all I could do. So I rack it. I'm like, okay, rate of perceived exertion, 1 to 10. That was probably 9. Okay, you got 10. How many more could you have done? That was it. 10 is all I had. Okay, now we've got a decision to make. Do I stay there? I still have 2 reps I can lose. So can I micro load? Can I add maybe a 2.5 on each side and still get 8 reps? So it gives you a point of negotiation with yourself to continually challenge yourself and to make sure you're getting the most out of your workouts. And sometimes you choose wrong. So sometimes you pick a weight and you'll have to stay there. Sometimes you pick a weight and you bit off more than you can chew and you might have to go down. But having this dialogue with yourself is going to be super helpful for you to train about a bunch of variables, because maybe today you're not feeling nearly as strong on those squats as you did last week. So we've got to be able to renegotiate that and make any adjustments that we need to make. And that's where reps in reserve and rate of perceived exertion can come into play and help you navigate through how much load am I working against. Because I'm here to remind you, especially from the standpoint of changing your physique and just, getting healthier. And it's not just about how much load I lift. Your body doesn't know weight. It doesn't know if it's 400 pounds or 200 pounds. So rate of perceived exertion, reps in reserve can be super helpful for that. Where should they go in the workout? Meaning, where should the compound movements fit in the workout? This will be our last little talking point. I could go on another hour on most of these and even deeper, but I wanted to keep it as basic as possible to get you guys thinking about some things. But where should compounds exist in the workout? They should always be at the beginning, right? Nah, put them wherever, man. It's your fitness. There's no rules on this. There's themes and there's general principles that we follow in training systems, but it's supposed to be fun, man. So mix it up. Maybe last week you started with squats, and maybe this week you're gonna pre-exhaust first. You're gonna do leg extensions, you're gonna work calves, you're gonna do a bunch of other stuff, and then you're going to squat. Yeah, you won't be able to use as much load, but who cares? It's about stimulation and getting those tissues working. Where should they go in the workout? Put them wherever you want and play with it, because you might find a spot that you prefer. You might be doing it in a way that you just thought that's how it needed to be, but maybe you get more out of that movement when you do pre-exhaust. Maybe you don't. Maybe you should mix it up. For me, I like mixing it up and creating some differences in order of operation of where my exercises go, because I like that change in stimulation. I like the challenge that it creates for me. So don't put yourself in too many weird boxes that you can't get out of. This is supposed to be fun, and you're kind of your own science experiment of trying new things, seeing what it feels like, because who am I to tell you what's better? If you feel like you feel more of what you want when you do it this way versus that way, man, your subjective feedback is valuable for your own training. So these are just some things to consider. I do encourage you guys to prioritize your compound movements. Again, they're the best bang for your buck. If you get really good at them, it's gonna help you add lean tissue to your frame. It's gonna help you keep lean tissue. I just talked to somebody the other day that was, they're in a competition prep for bodybuilding. And I gave them, my theory on when you're in a prep and now it's time to lose the body fat, I'm not a big believer in changing your training, because whatever you did in training to put the tissue on your frame, to put the muscle there, is also what you're gonna use, in my opinion, to help keep it there. So I tell all my clients all the time, don't jump ship, especially if the boat's not sinking. But I hope this is helpful for you guys. I hope that if you're not prioritizing compound movements, you can start, and that you notice the difference on your physique, how you feel, how you perform, how you look, because I know it's made a difference for me. So prioritize those compound movements. Try those top 5 that I listed: deadlift, squat, flat bench, overhead press, bent over barbell row. Again, all those with the barbell is a wonderful place to start to get things rolling in the right direction. I hope this helps. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments.